Hello. I decided that I would make this video as well because I felt like parts of me should. Um, I didn't make a separate video of my California festival experience, but I think that I should. But I did include it in one of my, let's say, monthly astrology videos. But I'll make a video about let's say this um, separate, let's say, California experience where I visited California for the first time. Originally, I visited Santa Monica for 2 days, and went there during the time when it was actually warm. It was warm, but it wasn't as hot and enough to swim. So regrettably, I went on those days, but I don't regret the experience. It was beneficial. What I got from being in having that experience is that I what I got is that I was I stayed there for like 4 days or something like that, or 2 days. I don't know, 4 days yet, and 3 days. And so I stayed there, and I actually wasn't really. It wasn't too hot. It wasn't warm. It was cloudy, which was a bummer that it wasn't sunny, but it could have been sunny. But I was there, and it could have been sunny enough to swim. But I was there, and I was picking up. I like the energy of California. I was picking up on, let's say, information about California where I knew about this place, Los Angeles, from way before. But I didn't know specifically what it was, but I knew about this place spiritually. And so later in the festival, when I was at the festival later, I found out that Lemurians were actually on the coast of California. And so that's why I knew about this place spiritually. And so it was my first time being in California outside of LAX. It was beneficial to me for me to do that. What specifically I lived in a hostel there for like 3 days, and I went to the observatory. It was nice. It was beautiful. It was nice and beautiful. Like the energy there. It's not completely clean, but it was beautiful. So I decided that. So then later, this is when actually I decided to go to Hawaii later. Let's say during summer. It was actually in April. Later I'll talk to you about, there's this guy who I met at a party who introduced me to acid for the first time. And when I was in acid for the first time, I felt the distortion of time and space completely collapse. And so I had that experience where that part of me that perceived time and space collapsed. So 8 hours felt like nothing. So this was actually during, I think it was late April. I'm not sure exactly, but it was somewhere in April or March or April, somewhere along the lines of March or April. The guy who I met at a party, introduced me to acid. And so this was March 2025, April 2025. And so I was on it for about 8 hours, and for the experience itself, the experience was all in my head, but the external world did not change. The experience was all in my head. It's all the patterns that were in my head that I was seeing. Where I was seeing these visuals, and I was trying to channel information about the origins of Earth and everything like that, and all this type of stuff. And I was getting all this information about certain things, how everything is like a lie or whatever. And then I was on it for 8 hours, and I stopped. And so later, or Sky invited me to go to a festival to California for 2 weeks during the late of April. For 2 weeks. And so I decided that I would go because I thought this experience of being at a festival would be beneficial. So, and also before the festival was 5 days, but before the festival, I went to Palm Springs for, let's say, a SACS conference. And so when I was in so we first took a train all the way from Washington State to California, and that's the first time taking a train for that long, that far. It was a nice ride where we got to connect to each other socially, and it was good in terms of having a social connection, and it was nice being there. It was kind of comfortable, and so we went all the way from Washington to California, and we would go there, and we got a rental, and it was nice. It was like relaxing being there, and we got a rental to go all the way to Palm Springs. And that's where the SACS conference was. And so when I was at the SACS conference, I got an opportunity to meet new people, new guys, and it was nice because it felt like felt like rejuvenated, or like I had like a bunch of joy in me, rejuvenation, and it felt like it was joy, it was pleasure without sin, in a way where I didn't feel like it was taken away anything from me, because we got free food, and I was at a hotel there, comfortably and beautifully, and it was paid for, and I was there, and I would go to the pool all the time, and there was a pool party where people talked to each other at the pool, and we knew each other, or we talked to each other, and we got to meet new people. And I wasn't really into the sex. It was like a whatever for me, and I don't like being objectified anyway, but I did have sex, and so I didn't like being objectified in that way. But I guess other people, let's say, shot videos with other people who went with me. I went with Sky and like a couple of his friends, and I went with them. And so somebody shot videos there, or they shot with each other, and I didn't shoot like a lot of videos, but I did shoot some, yeah. And so I was there for a couple of days, and I would go to the festival, and we would go together to the festival. And so when we went to the festival, we had, let's say, we used an RV truck to go to the festival, and I would help them, and we all help each other, and so we got foods to be there. I love the festival experience because when I went to the festival, it was kind of like a thing where it was artistic, where there were people that were creative, there's like a lot of color, there was art, people would be acting like crazy in the music, and this was during the night particularly, where people would miss music, and in the midst of, let's say, color visuals, let's say light visuals, people would dance to music and stuff like that, and I would dance as well, and it was beautiful, it was nice, but during the day, I was at the day talks. I was going to the festival at day talks. The food there we brought because it was too expensive. So I would go to day talks, and I would watch people talk about consciousness specifically, and they talked, and I would watch them, and I would watch about every tent had its own theme, and people talked about consciousness there, and it was a lot of benefit there when I got to, let's say, it's kind of like a one-on-one experience, or not one-on-one, but it's kind of like an experience where people could connect with each other on the subject. It was nice. And so during the night, however, there are electro music performers who would perform, and they would perform, and there would be like beautiful colors, patterns, visuals, music. It would go along with my sight, and I would observe everything and process all the sensory experience. I did choose not to be on acid because I want to be grounded, because I benefit a lot from being grounded. And so there's beauty towards that experience. And so during the day, so every day there are new, let's say, topics or new events that would happen there. And so during the day, one time I, let's say, would go to one of these events, or I would go to these events, and during the day, one time I saw on the schedule that Matthias Stefano and Blue of Earth would talk at one of the events, and I was not expecting to see them, because I would only see them on YouTube as people in consciousness talking about consciousness and their experiences, their expeditions, and how they would go everywhere, and let's say how they would, they would go to Egypt and they would get information there, like spiritual information, like a lot of spiritual experiences. And so I saw Matthias Stefano talk there, and I was so excited to see him, and I saw him. My video got cut off. And so my video got cut off, and I saw Matthias Stefano and Blue of Earth talk, and Matthias Stefano gave a speech with Robert Grant, and so they would talk about spirituality, their expeditions, what they would do, what they would, what they got from the expeditions. And Matthias Stefano apparently remembers all his past lives. And so he talks about how he went to Egypt, and how in the past life in Egypt, 13,000 years ago, there would be, he got a message that 13,000 years from that moment, he would be doing something unique or special or something like that. And so, which was increasing the consciousness of humanity. And apparently humanity is doomed for extinction, but we have the potential to change time-wise, and that's the whole premise of his talk. And so later, he was talking with Robert Grant, and with Robert Grant, they went on the expedition to Antarctica. And when they went to Antarctica on the expedition, they got information codes on Antarctica. And so when they got information codes about Antarctica, Robert Grant, created this technology, or not technology, but he was trying to, figure out, mathematics to how to create the artifact. And this artifact is kind of like this, being that he can channel, that would give him all types of information about everything that existed and stuff like that. And it was fascinating. And so I watched them talk. It was a lot better to watch them in person, because their energy is really unique. They hold, and so it was interesting. Watching them in person was particularly interesting, which I liked. So I was fascinated by their talks, and I loved what they talked about. And of course, I saw Blue of Earth, who I also knew through YouTube. Apparently, I didn't know a lot of things about her until I saw that video, and apparently she was somebody that struggled with being deaf, and so she found her purpose after being deaf, where she gives talks, or gives these conscious talks about consciousness. And so she found about gene keys and stuff like that. She talks about those. It was nice watching her as well. I liked her energy as well. but particularly like Matthias Stefano. I just enjoyed that, seeing them there, and I was surprised that I saw them. I didn't think that I would see them, but I saw them. And so I felt like part of that was my purpose on that trip, was to see Matthias Stefano specifically, which I believe that was the purpose of the trip. So I benefited a lot from the trip. We would live in an RV. We would eat food, like vegetarian, vegan food, and so I would walk every day to the talks every day, and I'll watch what they would do, and so I would watch what they would do, and so and the talks that they give, and so I liked hanging out with Sky and his friends, with Jet and what's his name? I forget. Little bro. What's his name? Little bro. And we talked about all types of stuff together, and we slept together as well in the same RV. And so we would hang out there for 5 days, and I'll listen to specific songs that I had. And so we would go back on the train back to Seattle, and I loved that experience a lot. Yeah.